Right, hello guys and welcome back. New Malpais is one of the two new exotic weapons brought to us in the Ash and Iron update, and this thing is juiced. So today I'm going to take you through how this weapon works, what the catalyst does, and how to use it most efficiently, plus any additional interactions it may have. Oh, and also to compare it to Mint Retrograde, because yeah, under the hood, this thing is a rocket pulse, making it the second ever one we've received so far. Bit strange, it also had to be Strand, but Bungie mentioned in the recent developer livestream that they wanted it to feel like an upgrade to Mint Retrograde, so let's see if that's true.
The Edge of Fate, we released a rocket frame pulse rifle, Mint Retrograde, that people have really taken to a liking for. And we kind of took a look at that and we're like, well, what's a cool way to one-up that and like plus one it for an exotic?
And if you enjoyed today's content, then a like and subscribe is greatly appreciated. So, New Malpais is a Strand exotic rocket pulse, and one of the first things that makes it different is actually its rate of fire, which is currently set to 320 RPM, whereas Mint Retrograde is slightly lower at 200 RPM. So, taking a look at a quick side-by-side, you can see that the New Malpais is able to empty its magazine faster. In terms of what the gun actually does, it has the main trait atomizing rounds, which reads like so. Rounds fired embed themselves in targets, R pressed to detonate embedded rounds. And taking a look in-game, firing the weapon at the floor leaves behind these small green bombs that explode after about 6 seconds. However, as it says, you can hold press the reload action to detonate them at your own discretion. And side note, the damage of the explosion is the same regardless of whether you manually detonate them or leave them to explode on their own. So if there was a really chunky target on the field, specifically a boss, it can be better to just lay on the trigger and wait for the automatic explosions. I say specifically a boss because the second trait, Suspending Blast, reads like so. Detonating a large number of rounds embedded in a single target suspends them, and the actual amount is 2 full bursts, which isn't a lot at all. And circling back to the boss part real quick, because you can't suspend bosses, I figure it's more worth it in terms of DPS to just continue firing rather than stopping to get the small suspend explosion damage. But for mini bosses, champions, and the like, getting into a rhythm of shooting 2 bursts, then triggering the blast, which subsequently causes the suspend, is quite satisfying to do. As a result, this weapon is able to stun unstoppable champions, but also because we currently have anti-barrier pulse rifle in the artifact, it's able to stun barrier champs as well, giving it some good dual purpose functionality. Speaking of anti-barrier, previously, before Ash and Iron, rocket pulse rifles weren't able to pierce certain shields like the ones found on Vex Hydras or Hive Knights, but I'm pleased to report this has been fixed and now they properly pierce the barrier. Lastly, before we begin breaking down any numbers, the catalyst for this weapon states that this weapon's explosions unravel nearby targets, and while I don't personally have it yet, I can comment that just on first impression, this is a pretty solid catalyst, giving the weapon yet another Strand debuff to access. So, I'm sure the question on everyone's minds now is how does it compare to Mint Retrograde? Does it deal more damage, more DPS? What's the deal? Well, for starters, let's get the damage per burst done first. A single burst from New Malpais deals a total of 1600 damage, and for a basic tier 4 Mint Retrograde with no damage perks at all, a single burst deals 1300 damage, meaning that without any damage perks, New Malpais is around 24% better than Mint. However, now let's bring in some damage perks, and to make things a little more fair, I'm also going to unravel Carl with my arcane needle beforehand to simulate the catalyst. So for the entire reserves of New Malpais, the DPS sits around 1250 with a total damage value of around 46,000. Then, with the god roll of rewind rounds, elemental honing, and making sure to have procced 5 stacks of the buff, Mint Retrograde does gap New Malpais with a better DPS value of 1700. However, it does lose out on total damage with a lower value of around 31,000, giving New Malpais around 47% more total damage. And considering that the majority of the bosses in the Desert Perpetual raid favor total damage over DPS, this is quite a good thing to be aware of if you were thinking of bringing it in. That said though, the previous test was without any temporal mods like Temporal Blast or Temporal Armaments, so the side-by-side you're seeing now is the results of using both of those two mods, with Blast on the left and Armaments on the right, which as a reminder is a 17% damage increase when enhanced versus Cabal and Vex targets. And the results are in. Temporal Armaments just slightly edges out Blast in terms of both DPS and total, but still, both of them are still less total damage than New Malpais. I also did another test with only 3 stacks of Elemental Honing, which is a 20% damage buff by the way, to get a more middle of the road kind of value, because in reality, you aren't going to be proccing +5 the majority of the time, resulting in 1800 DPS and 32k total. Upon some further testing, I found that if you want to get around 1600 DPS, a good method is to fire 6 bursts at a time and detonate, counting the leftover ammo in the mag. So if in the first mag I had 1 left, I only count 5 into the new mag, then 4 into the next, and so on. That said though, I do believe this weapon's intended damage metric is in fact total damage rather than DPS. The next thing I want to show you with regards to DPS is actually how much super energy this thing is able to generate, especially from the remote detonations, and as you can see, it's very significant and not to be underestimated. So despite it having a lower DPS than Mint Retrograde, it still packs a mean punch, generates a lot of super, and is good in areas where Mint is not. Now for this next section, I want to highlight a few areas where I think this weapon could fit really well, specifically for your builds, and to no one's surprise, it's going to be pretty good when paired with any particular Strand build. For starters, because it's so easy to trigger a suspending explosion from only 2 bursts, any suspend focused build is going to massively benefit from it. And the first one that came to mind for me is a pure Strand Abeyant Leap Titan build, because with Abeyant Leap, any source of suspend you apply grants 10 seconds of woven mail, and in harder content, it's going to be very easy to find lots of higher health targets that are tanky enough to take 6 shots and therefore be suspended. Next up, Warlocks. I actually did just post a build yesterday that features new Malpais as the main primary weapon, and the reason why I was able to do this and basically never worry about running out of ammo was because number 1, new Malpais has 27 total reserves, which is 9 higher than Mint by the way, and number 2, running 200 weapon stat and a Strand Scavenger makes it so each special brick you create drops 10 rounds for you to use. In fact, if you ran with the same setup on Hunter, as in 200 weapons, but this time used Foe Tracer, each time the rounds hit a target, you'll trigger an unraveling burst with the catalyst, which counts as ability damage for Foe Tracer. So for no effort at all, you'll be walking around with a permanent 25% damage buff and infinite ammo, which at least to me is pretty fun. So in my opinion, if you want to get the most out of this weapon, I would recommend my Titan viewers try it with Abeyant Leap, Warlocks go for 200 weapons and a shiny new Weave Walk build, link in the description, then Hunters just go crazy with Foe Tracer for a super fun time. And thinking about it, I might make a build video specifically for the Hunter, let me know in the comments if you want to see that. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to cover was its synergies with micro missile perks. So does it synergize with hazardous propulsion, for example? And unfortunately, it does not. For some reason, despite this weapon being a rocket pulse, it doesn't work with any micro missile based things like hazardous propulsion, the ion renewal / adapter set bonuses, or the like, which I actually did mention in yesterday's video, so sorry about that. It wasn't until I began writing this script that I had realized it didn't work. Perhaps this is a bug, I'm not sure, but it might be an unintentional side effect of the design of it because it's technically firing bombs, not rockets, not sure. Either way, no micro missile synergy, sadly. So that's about as much info I've got for you on new Malpais. I hope you enjoyed the video and perhaps learned something new. It's a very good gun and I recommend you try it out and have some fun to take your mind off the dwindling state of the game. Deary me. Anyway, that will be all for today. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.